Hello. Let's go through a few different ways you can pattern match in Rust. So the normal ones that people talk about are normal patterns, match statements, there are if let, match irrefutable matching, and there are a few different places you can do this. So it's in function signatures and in variable declarations, for loops, and so on. Yeah. And then as a last thing, let else statements, which is one of my favorites. Let's go through these one by one. So the standard case is if you have a value, like let's say an option, value equals sum5. What you can do is you can match on this value, and if it's sum, you do one up, you do something. If it's none, you do something else. This is the standard case, very useful. If you want, you can in any of these branches also return a value. So if it's sum, maybe you do value plus 5. If it's none, maybe you default it to be 3 and return this as the result of the match statement. And then print. So this is normal match statements. They're good. I think the nice thing about them is that you get to handle all cases, and it's very explicit. The one thing is that you create indentation. So, but you can a lot of the time avoid that by doing this sort of pattern where you return a result and then go on to doing the next thing. Okay, so in the case like this where it's actually just two values, sum or none, and if you only care about doing anything in one of these situations, so maybe in one case, if you're not returning a result, maybe you just, if it's sum, you want to print something. In that case, this is not necessary. Instead, what you can do is you can do one match on the specific variant that you care about, like this. And then in that case, you do this print. And in the other case, you don't have to explicitly handle the none case, which is nice. Yeah, okay, so that's match statements if let. So irrefutable pattern matching can be done in a few different places. One is just inline. So for example, as an example, let's say you have a struct values with A, which is 32, and B, which is a useIce. What you then can do is you can say val equals values A3, B2, or 1. In some other location, if you're, for example, let's say we have a function. So function values do values. The normal way to do it here is to take in a values parameter, and maybe this function doesn't return anything. This is all fine. It's move this out. This is all good, and you can print it out or whatever. Let's say A, B, but another thing you can do is destruct it. So if you have something like a struct in this way, you technically, this is called an irrefutable pattern match, where you can say values AB is of type values. So you destruct it, and you can do it like this in the method body itself. You have to use patterns that can always be matched, that don't have a failure case. But it's nice in the case that it does. Makes it shorter. It also forces you to explicitly use all variables. Like if I only used A here, I get a clippulent that I should be using the other variable. If I instead did it the way we did it before, there's no explicit thing that's complaining if all values are not used, which can be useful. And for larger structs, in general, if you want to use all values inside of a struct, and you want to make sure that any new additions to the struct also are used in that location, that's when this sort of pattern is useful. You can do it directly as well in a variable, so we can go back to values like this and say values AB equals values, just as a method. You can also, let's say you have an array of values. You can do for values AB in array. This works exactly the same way. And then finally, let's say this function now takes an optional values. And in the sum case, we want to do something. In the none case, this function maybe is just a no op. What you can do in that case is you can say let val inner equals, or sum inner equals values, else return. Just skip the rest of the function. We don't want to do anything anymore. And then print out values, or yeah, whatever else you want to do. This is nice and can only be used actually when the body of this else block doesn't early return or continues a for loop or some other thing that breaks out of the current context, because anything below here has access to inners. So this body needs to do a return. But in the case where it is, it removes the indentation that you would get from doing flet everywhere. So it's like the standard guard pattern, and this is very useful for. Okay, yeah, that's a summary of at least a larger collection of all the ways you can do pattern matching in Rust. Obviously, the individual patterns themselves can look very different, and the ways to think about that is maybe a little bit more involved. But yeah, these are the different like overall categories of pattern matching that you can do.